Okay, okay. Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a sales associate here at Fossil Creek Nursery. I just graduated this past Saturday with my Bachelor in Science in Horticulture. Um, and for the summer, I'll be working at Fossil Creek Nursery, which is really fun. And today I'm here to talk to you about beneficial insects. I have just a couple examples, and for the most part, I'll focus on opportunistic insects because the species specific ones are kind of hard to track down. It's pretty rare that you'd apply that in a landscape setting. It's more for controlled settings. I did study under Dr. Cranshaw at Colorado State University. He was really cool. Unfortunately, I had to take his class online, but I still didn't miss the experience. I still had him lecture me, and I reached out with questions. It was fun, really, to contact him if we ever found something here at the nursery that we had questions about. And I think initially I'll just start with kind of the breakdown about how you would ideally have an ecosystem work. Um, so obviously, for there to be beneficial insects in your garden, you're going to need food, and that's the thing that gets them to stick around, lay eggs. The larvae are typically the stage that eats the most um, non-beneficial insects, I guess you could say, the most plant predators. But you are going to need intermittent food. So, for there to be beneficial insects in your garden, you're going to have to deal with some plant pests, unfortunately, and that's just kind of the cycle of life. Um, some examples would be aphids. We have woolly mealybug here, woolly aphids, scale. We've seen some scale here lately. And then grubs and some other things like moths. Those are kind of my top ones, I guess. Um, so, one of the best things to encourage beneficial insect habitation is the um, inclusion of what they call like beneficial habitats. So areas of your garden that you do not spray, you do not touch, you leave the foliage there over the entire winter. And there's a couple good studies that I looked at for a paper that I wrote on organic agriculture. And they found that even in conventional agriculture, if you're planning on spraying something, if you're organic, it doesn't matter. If you have those strips of land for the insects to live, you are going to find that they'll stick around if they have a place to hang out where there's nothing applied that can hurt them, there's nothing applied that will hurt the insects that they eat, and then they have some brush to sleep in, to lay eggs in, to habitate, as it were. Um, and there's there's not really plants that I would say really strongly attract beneficial insects. It's more of the prey that they are going to follow. And in some cases, you are going to have to purchase them outright. Sometimes you can attract them, but we don't have a ton of native plant predators that really do some serious damage, like ladybugs and praying mantises do. And then I have some nematodes as well, which has been really cool. We didn't get those in years past, and I love them. Um, so you do have to cover all your bases. You're going to have to make sure, like we talked about, the plant habitat that you leave over the winter where they'll stay overnight or over the winter. And then you have to make sure that you don't treat, and I know this is probably one of the hardest things, but you don't really spray or treat any beneficial, or I mean plant pests. You're going to want to leave them there and then grab or hopefully attract some beneficial insects. And they are going to need intermittent food. Bugs usually live in a boom bust cycle, as I understand it. And so the aphid population will boom, and then you'll have a boom of predators, and then both populations kind of have a rest period, followed by usually then the plant pest boom. Um, but hopefully, in the middle, in the median, you can attract or have some um, plant pests that are a little less intense, like the aphids just explode population wise in those strip areas where they'll probably already naturally live. so that you can keep your beneficial insects in the meantime waiting for that next boom cycle. And then thirdly, you have to make sure that you have a wide variety. Obviously, we want to encourage biodiversity wherever possible, especially as it's decreasing so quickly, unfortunately. And that can be done by attracting or applying a range of beneficial insects. So here we carry the praying mantis, and the interesting thing is that this says that it is the Chinese praying mantis, but the egg cases look a little bit more like the Carolina mantis type or species. And part of me wonders if that's because people have been kind of trying to apply species native to North America, which is great. I think that's awesome. And then I know since they are opportunistic predators, they have been eating and taking advantage of some pests or some insects that we might want to keep around, like monarch larvae, which is really pretty sad. The other thing that I have for you guys to look at are the ladybugs. I think everybody knows these. They're kind of the poster child of beneficial insects because they're so cute. And they are awesome. Like I said, they're one of the insects that the larval stage is the most beneficial stage. So you let these go in the morning or evening, and you just really hope that by having your fallow strips and having intermittent food for them, that they will stick around and lay eggs, because that is really what's going to help you the most. And then lastly, this is the first year I've ever gotten these. These are nematodes. Nematodes are kind of like a microscopic worm almost. And they feed on detritus. They feed on bad insects. Sometimes they'll feed on plants. There's only a couple species that do in the soil. So they're going to be kind of, if you kind of approach all of these, you have a flying, I think the females fly, but you have one that for the most part will be your ground control and then soil control. And you should be able to cover 3 bases across the board. And I think lastly, well, I'll actually briefly touch on some species-specific plant predators or pests, some species-specific pest predators. There are some, and typically they're in the form of a mite or a parasitic wasp. The issue that people run into with those guys is that they usually have really specific requirements in terms of being healthy. So I know a lot of parasitic wasps, they need really high humidity to live. And obviously this isn't the spot for them. They can usually survive in a greenhouse setting and they'll reproduce. It's really cool. And they don't usually sting, as far as I know. So from that angle, you don't really have to worry about them. They don't care about people. And they also are really good at their job. But the issue that we run into is the control settings they need, because they've evolved so closely with the plant pests that we run into not being able to provide them with the conditions that they're used to and that they're adapted to. And there's not a ton of breeding going on with those guys yet. We might see some of that in the future. But as far as I know, we'll be sticking to opportunistic predators. The issue that you can sometimes run into with opportunistic predators is that, like the name implies, they eat just about everything under the sun. A lot of them target just soft-bodied anything that they can get their mouth on. And that's just like having the plant pests in your garden. That's kind of a sacrifice that you have to make to kind of keep the cycle of life intact. So they are going to eat like butterfly larvae, caterpillars, I guess, like inchworms, kind of things you might want to stick around there. That's just one of the things that nature bred them to do and that they will do. So that's something that you have to kind of let go. But for the most part, they will target the plant pests that I listed earlier. I think it's mostly aphids that people usually try and treat. The other nice thing is that usually you can track which plants are most susceptible to plant pests. A lot of times they have families or genuses that they like to stick to food-wise that they really kind of prefer. So that way you can keep kind of um, like a list of the most susceptible plants in your garden that will likely see some aphids or see some mealybug within the year. Um, and obviously, I guess not really lastly, but to encourage the cycle of life, to encourage plant pests, and then to encourage your or pest predators, you are not going to want to spray anything that will hurt them. I would almost not recommend spraying at all if you can help it. Um, Whenever they make insecticides, they don't really design them in a way that they can target ladybugs but not aphids. That's a really hard line to play with because they work so similarly, and the way that pesticides work usually target um, one very specific thing, so they might not be able to molt, and they might not be able to respire through their skin, stuff like that, where we can't really draw that line, and therefore you shouldn't. If you want to encourage beneficial insects, you really shouldn't spray if you really can help it, because there's nothing that I can think of that wouldn't hurt a beneficial insect that would hurt a plant pest. Let's see. I guess if anyone had any questions for me, trying to think what else I could chat about. Let's see. Oh, resources. Yeah, so I found this a really cool blog on Cornell's website, their extension. I was just kind of looking for resources to talk about in this class, and they have a great blog post that's about beneficial insects where they have a list of plants that are high in nectar content that will attract plant pollinators, which attracts more of these beneficial insects. Like I think an ambush bug or an ambush beetle was one of the ones that they had a really cool picture of. And then you kind of encourage the cycle of life, as it were. So then, if you have the plant pest, the plant or pest predators, and then you also have the pollinators, then you have three bases for them to kind of all interact. But yeah, I would totally recommend. They had a really cool spreadsheet of plants that will attract plant pollinators that attract the rest, the whole slew of other insects, which was really cool. And then Dr. Crenshaw did retire, but he has a ton of really cool published resources, and I would highly recommend looking into his stuff just on any kind of journal, scientific journal website for insects. Nothing specific comes to mind, but he has a ton of published work, and he's really a good resource. And I think he's still in Colorado, and he's a really great guy. So if you guys ever need a resource, I'm sure you can find his contact information on the CSU employee website. But yeah, I feel like that's it. You can always reach out to us here at Fossil Creek Nursery if you ever have any questions. All of our staff are very knowledgeable. There's just a couple of us that really like bugs, myself included, so you can always ask for us specifically. My name's Abby, and I think with that, we will probably wrap up. Like I said, just reach out if you have any questions, and we'll be here. So, thanks for coming.